Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. I'm your host, Margie Schaller, and I want to welcome you today and let you know that you are not alone. How many of you have been in those situations where the alcohol-forward events at conferences or business parties have made you feel isolated? I know I have, but through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you who choose not to drink or drink less can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice. So let's get the conversation started. It is my absolute privilege and honor to introduce you to Toni Will. Now, she's got 25 years experience in leadership starting in banking, but now, ready for this? She's the general manager and governor for the Kalamazoo Wings, a men's AA professional hockey team. So she's the first female general manager to serve on the Board of Governors in this hockey league. Toni launched also her lifestyle coaching business, Mindfulness Elevated, in 2021 to help others find freedom from substances, reaching fitness, nutrition goals, as well as professional development coaching. She's passionate about helping emerging leaders break through their own glass ceiling. Toni, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, it's so cool to be on. I am so excited. I love Sober Life Rocks. The name is so fun and I love fun.
Oh, great. Well, so do we. One of the things that we wanted to try to do in this is bring people from outside of the narrow industry that we've started in, which is dentistry.
Mhm.
And what I know is that you have exactly aligned missions, but in different areas. So we're going to get to that.
Yes.
But I want to know a little bit more about sort of you.
Mhm.
And I always like to start with kind of your family of origin story.
Mhm. Yeah.
Where did alcohol fit in your family of origin story?
Yeah. So I'm born and raised in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I'm still here. I never left, and I'm so fortunate because I love Kalamazoo. And yes, there really is a Kalamazoo. So if you all want to look it up, it's a great city. And actually, a lot of people have been here when I talk about where I'm from. But my family of origin, so alcohol was social. With my mom and dad, I grew up in the 80s. I'm going to be 46 years old here in June. And so I was born in 78, but my upbringing was in the 80s. And so my parents were hosting pinochle parties, right? And as I got older, it was euchre. They were in bowling leagues, they were very social, but it wasn't to excess. I grew up on a lake. I had a very blessed childhood. And so you think about some of these things where alcohol really could have been folded in on a daily basis. But it really wasn't. It was just social. And my mom and dad are still married. They just celebrated 49 years. And I have a younger brother who lives in South Carolina. So I'm not that far from them, just about 30 minutes away. So I can stay nearby because my mom has late stage Alzheimer's and my dad's taking care of her and he's 81. So yeah, I have this beautiful small family upbringing, small town in Michigan. And it was very uneventful.
So, spoiler alert, I know that you're now sober.
Yes.
So, somewhere along the lines, things went sideways for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love to put myself through the ringer. So, if I were to go back to the line of demarcation, like that was really important to me to figure out during this journey. I'll tell you that I remember the day. I can close my eyes and tell you the day that I Googled, am I an alcoholic? Sitting on my couch hungover. Boy, if anyone's listening to this thinking, do I have a problem with alcohol? If you Googled that, chances are your relationship with alcohol is not one you're aligned with. It doesn't mean you're an alcoholic. It just means you don't like your relationship with alcohol, right? So in hindsight, everything's 2020. But I went through a divorce in 2008. I've been married. I'm on my third marriage, and I will say third time's the charm. Let's go around. But during my first marriage,
Your
we had
practice
two
marriage, right?
children. What's that?
Your practice marriage.
Yeah, exactly. I had a couple practices. So I got married in my early 20s. We had two children together. I had launched my career prior to having kids, but I just wasn't happy. I am very much a restless person. I've got a fire in my belly of pretty much about anything and everything. And so there was just something about our core values were just not aligned. And a very Catholic family. He grew up one of 7 children. I was raised Catholic as well, but not as Catholic. His brother is a Catholic priest. He married us. He baptized our kids. And so, my husband, my first husband, it was, let's have a bunch of kids and you can stay home if you'd like. And none of that interest. I wanted to have kids, but not a lot. And I certainly didn't want to stay home. And so I test drove that life and it's not for me. So at 29, I decided that I wanted to end that marriage. And that was very hard for a lot of reasons, right? The stigma, which a lot of parallels between the divorce and drinking. And that was it. That's when I know, and it took me years to figure this out, by the way. I didn't figure this out till I was in my 40s, that I started to cope at 29 with alcohol instead of it just being social. Because I wasn't a drinker in high school and college. I wasn't. I graduated from Western Michigan University with my business degree. I've always been a hard worker, always enjoyed, I got a lot of reward from working and building my career. And so alcohol really didn't fit into that. But where it did fit in was emotionally. And that began my spiral downward. I spent my entire 30s trying to wrap my arms around, how do I have it all? And that was my governing belief. How do I have it all? And my definition of all at the time was, you start the day with coffee, you end the day with wine. And as long as those things held true in a workout, because I value fitness and nutrition, even when I was drinking, which is the irony in that, now looking back, but that was my governing belief. In order to have it all, I had to have those things. And I was really wrong.
That whole notion of being this high performer, because I was as well, is, at least for me, was part of the denial system.
Oh, yeah.
Of how I justified, like, if you had the life I had,
you drink
too. And there can't be anything really wrong with my drinking, because look at all these things that I do every day. And so
100%. I was doing, no exaggeration, I was doing an Ironman.
Yeah.
I spent my 30s doing triathlons, running marathons, running half marathons, doing half Ironmans. I was training my butt off. So what did I deserve? Alcohol. Let me undo everything I just did. So yeah, 100%. And I did that while working full time and raising my children and being married. And yeah, I deserved it. That was a big belief I had.
Okay, so let's fast forward now. And the moment comes when you are finally ready to turn the page for this final time. What was that moment about?
So this final chapter where I'm at now, it was very uneventful. The first time I stopped drinking was much more eventful, but it didn't stick. But this time I was up north Michigan. I was on a girls' weekend, and this was in October of 2020. And I was sitting around a bonfire, and I was drunk, and I'm looking around, and I'm asking myself, why can't I get my arms wrapped around this? Why am I drinking so much more than these other women? I'm so sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I stumbled off to bed. I woke up in the morning. I texted my husband. We'd been married at that point for 4 months. And I said, yeah, I'd just gotten remarried. And I just said, I think I'm going to take a break from alcohol. And I probably only had like 4 or 5 hours of sleep. But if, we know the science behind alcohol, the adrenaline was, kicking in, and which is why you can't sleep, why you wake up at 3 a.m. or whatever. And so I texted him and I said, I think I'm going to take a 30-day break. And he said, oh, is this one of those Toni breaks? Because I talked about this a lot, right? And he was not malicious at all. And I'm like, no, I really mean it. And I'm going to do 30 days. And for the first 15 days, it was hard, not physically, but emotionally. It was just really hard. I wanted so desperately to have it all. And so I Googled I just Googled, because of course Google's the expert, right? So I Googled different like stop drinking methodologies or something, because I did AA. I tried AA my first go around, and I was sober for 15 months. And I was like, and I talked myself out of it, and I went back out drinking for 3 more years. And when I found this Naked Mind, I read Annie's book, And then I Googled and said, well, they have a live alcohol experiment coming up. And so in November of 2020, I did the
And
live alcohol experiment.
This Naked Mind is written by Annie Grace,
Mhm.
and it's something that a number of the people who have come on this podcast have mentioned. And Laura herself, Laura Nelson, my co-founder, is getting certified as a
Mhm.
or this Naked Mind coach, as are you.
Yes.
And
Yes,
so,
I'm certified and I'm a senior coach with this Naked Mind. So I got certified in the summer of 21 or the spring of 21. And that's when I launched Mindfulness Elevated, which is my lifestyle coaching business that helps other people reduce or remove. And I like to talk about reduction because um, that is to be celebrated. And back when I first tried to stop in my mid to late 30s and I was doing AA, and that methodology is totally different and outdated. There's a place for it. And the community was fabulous. So I don't want to sound like I'm bashing it, but the methodology is very behavior based, where this Naked Mind is where we really get into the emotions, which then lead to the behaviors. And so I decided to launch my lifestyle coaching business, help people to reduce or remove alcohol, because reduction leads to generally what I find is someone that wants to remove alcohol. And then I became a senior coach with this Naked Mind. I have clients all over the U.S. and Canada. The business exploded. And I do that because I love it. It's a passion of mine. It's definitely mission based, mission over money. Now I do charge, so I want to make sure I'm clear on that. But my day job, I do that full time. So and actually they've morphed into this beautiful space together in pro hockey.
okay, so let's go back there. I
Mhm.
would love to know, how in the world did you even get involved in men's hockey? That's crazy. Like, my husband is such a fan of men's hockey, but a female general manager?
Yeah.
Tell me about
So,
that.
yeah, this is a great question. I get it quite often. So, the number one, the short answer, succinct, is relationships. The more expansive answer is I was running the Chamber of Commerce here in Kalamazoo. And for those that don't know what chambers do, they help small businesses grow, right? They're very community based. They're all about public policy, education, helping businesses grow, right? So I'm leading the Chamber of Commerce. I loved what I did externally for the chamber, but internally, the culture did not match my core values. Very different leadership back then. It was over a decade ago. And so I left in my mid 30s, no job. I'm very much a rebel. And so I decided that I was going to figure something else out, maybe stay in nonprofit, but go into fundraising. But I applied for a job in what's the Radisson Hotel here in Kalamazoo. It's privately owned, and it's called Greenleaf Hospitality Group. Within Greenleaf Hospitality Group, it's sports, entertainment, dining, and a hotel. Well, the sports and entertainment arm held the Kalamazoo Wings. So I actually applied to be the store manager of a high-end fashion boutique in the hotel.
Okay.
I like fashion and I wanted less responsibility. My whole career up until that point was leadership, building teams, teaching sales, selling myself. It was all the time, lots of pressure, and I wanted less. I wanted to do less. And so they called me and they said, because a lot of them knew who I was, they were like, Toni, you're way overqualified. I said, I know. And they said, you're going to be bored. I'm like, that's okay. I want to be a little bored. And they were like, we're going to call you back. So they called me back a few weeks later and they said, we got an idea. And I said, okay, I'm all ears. And they said, the K Wings. I go, the hockey team? And they go, yeah. And I said, am I allowed to swear on this podcast, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. So I said, this is literally what I said. I don't know shit about hockey. And the HR person laughed and I said, I'm serious. She goes, we don't want someone that knows about hockey. We want someone that knows how to sell, understands a profit and loss, and how to build a front office team, sales, marketing, community relations, public relations, broadcasting, creative production. By the way, I didn't know how to do all that stuff. I knew how to do some. And most importantly, loves Kalamazoo. And I thought, okay. And so I took a 35% pay cut from what I was making. And I said yes to the best job I never knew I wanted. And I'm coming up on nearly 10 years.
Wow. Okay. Now, I know, because we talked a little bit before this, that
Hmm.
there's going to come a moment where these two worlds
Hmm.
intertwine.
Yes.
Can you bring us there?
Yes. So I'm passionate about a lot of things, and I like to point out, by removing this one thing from my life, alcohol,
Mhm.
it's opened up the so many doors. And I was already working in pro sports. So there's AF, right? So alcohol free, but then there was alcohol fueled, right? So Tony Alcohol Fueled was running this hockey team, and I was doing pretty well. But Tony Alcohol Free not only is running this hockey team, Launch Mindfulness Elevated, and now I have professional development coaching with Toni Will coaching. And I have this space as a woman in sports leadership where I am a minority. And
Mhm.
I'm also a minority because I choose not to drink. So I'm a role model, or I want to be a role model. I want to be a bridge for the next generation. I have two daughters, 22 and 17, and I have a son in the middle of that. So how do I bridge the gap? And so I've launched programs within our league, a mentor mentee program for women in sports. I sit in the steering committee for the National Sports Forum. We hosted our first ever full women's, the first time ever in 28 years, all women leadership panel around women in sports. And so I'm slowly breaking through these glass ceilings, and I'm the first governor on the board of governors for the league, female governors, and on the executive committee. So how can I pay it forward? So I can remove these barriers because I run into them still, not daily, but often for our daughters, my
Yeah.
future granddaughters. And so through that, I choose to speak very openly about you don't need to belly up to the bar in order to get to where you want to be in this industry or any industry. And I used to struggle with the fact that I wouldn't be respected if I chose not to drink around this in this male dominated industry. But the reality is, I'm actually respected more because I choose not to. And I'm more in line with my core values and my authenticity. So these worlds combined, on my website, I have a media page that just outlines the articles that have been written, the podcasts I've been on, to help the next generation, this generation, and a lot of the people I coach in my parents' generation, because I'm right smack dab in the middle of all of that right now in the sandwich generation, right? And so that's some of the work where I use that women in sports stage to help other women or anybody break through whatever their glass ceiling is. And by being vulnerable and talking about my own struggles.
So can we break that down a little bit? As I previously shared with many of the listeners on this podcast, like I didn't share that I was sober for the past 19 years. I
Mhm.
only just started in October of 2023 when Laura and I started Sober
Yeah.
Life Rocks. And one of the reasons why is that we do this networking around drinks.
Hmm.
And so I didn't want to start off by being uh, an outsider
Hmm.
or 20 years ago being judged as less than or a problem or a mess or all the things. Now times have changed, thank goodness.
Thank God.
Still some of that out there, but
Yeah.
there's a lot more people who respect the choices that are being
Hmm.
made. But you said the phrase, you don't have to belly up to the bar in order to be respected.
Hmm.
Nonetheless, that is where networking is done.
Hmm.
So tell me what you do,
Hmm.
stay in the middle of the networking without that piece of
That's
it.
a perfect question. I just got back from California. I was there this week for the Sports Business Journal conference. And so I speak at a lot of conferences. I wasn't speaking at this one, which is great because I could just sit back and absorb and network. And this one, I would tell you, this is how I described it to some of my clients and my husband. I'm like, it's a good thing that I have been alcohol free as long as I have, not nearly as long as you, which is congratulations, by the way. You're coming up on 20 years, which is just amazing, especially as we both know, like the stigma that existed 2 decades ago versus now. But I donned myself with a black belt because after this, there was just alcohol. I mean, it was alcohol saturated. And if this were 3 years ago, Tony, I don't know how I would have fared. We don't know, but I will say this is what I do. So I go immediately, I just kind of survey the room because I don't care if people are drinking or not. I don't even really notice it. It's so irrelevant in my life. I don't care. So I want to note that. And it's taken me a lot of work up here to get there. But I'll go to the bar and they always have the alcohol options up there. But I'll ask, do you have anything that's not soda, that's alcohol, not soda or water that's alcohol free? And now I'm seeing a lot more of that. So if I'm on the steering committee for some of these conferences, which this one I'm not, but I'll ask that the sponsors, because in sports, very alcohol saturated, if Anheuser-Busch is a sponsor, can we have some Bud Zero there? And they're like, oh, absolutely, Toni. We never even considered that. I'm like, great. So this conference had Heineken Zero. This is such a great question because the bartender says, oh, yeah. And he pulls it out like it's a secret. And then he puts a napkin around it for me so I can take it and be part of the crowd. And I said, "Oh, I don't need you to put the napkin on. I don't care if people don't know that I'm not drinking alcohol. In fact, I'm proud of it. I view being alcohol free as a privilege, not a punishment." And I took the napkin off and I walked away. And so personality plays a role in it, right? The rebellion part. And I'm very forward. Like I had someone text me, go, "Oh, Toni, I didn't know you were coming to this conference. Do you want to go grab a drink?" And I said, "Yeah, that's fine." When I get to the bar, I'm like, I knew that Heineken Zero at this point. I said, "Well, I'll have a Heineken Zero." And he goes, "Do you mind if I drink alcohol?" I go, "No, I don't give a shit. Drink whatever you want." And so it's just more about its identity, right? Identity is at the root of this. And part of the identity is knowing your personality. And so while I'm a lady that likes to color outside the lines, knowing that I'm rebellious isn't a bad thing. I used to label it as bad. How can I use this in my favor? So I'm different and I like to be different. So I'll continue to be different and I'll ask those questions. And I really tap into the courage and curiosity and confidence, like 3 C's for me. So if I were to be succinct at the very end of that long-winded answer, that's what I would say.
It's funny what you said. It depends on knowing what your personality style is, because what you just described is not me in the slightest. I am very much the product of having grown up in a family of origin where appearances were everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up with this hypervigilance of like making sure, do I fit in, and am I showing up with my best foot forward, and am I saying the right things, am I meeting the right people? Like the right thing to do was everything. It's the driving force behind how I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to go into those environments and just say, hey, I'd rather have this, if it's not the right thing, my little amygdala goes, oop, danger. Yep. Right. So I have to like have the self-talk to get through that moment. So one of the things that we're proposing is that at these little black bars, at these conferences, that if they have non-alcoholic options, put them on the bar or make a sign with the pictures so that somebody doesn't have to walk up and say over the loud music, hey,
Yep.
Do you have? They can just point and say, I want one of those.
I love it. Yes. I've been to many events where that's been the case too. So we're seeing that. But I love that because it does make a difference. And I would say probably about 75-25% now, whether it's at a conference or a restaurant where there's so many alcohol-free options that are popping up and in Michigan, right? So I'm in the Midwest. We're a little slower on the uptake than say California, right? So
really. Um, the other thing that's interesting and that we've been observing ourselves, we went to an event and there was non-alcoholic options that we put up in the bar, and people who were drinkers would have their first drink and then they'd say, oh, I want to try one of those. What's that like?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And would switch over to non-alcoholic for the rest of the evening because it tastes good.
Yeah. Yep.
And
it sure does.
They weren't waking up in the morning the next day either with the 3 or 4 drinks that otherwise might have happened.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'll say that although I've been a rebel since the day I came out, my parents will tell you that, the shame, it took me a long time to shed the shame.
Yeah.
Right. And so this version of me that you and I are chatting right now, if you and I were talking about this 3 years ago, I present as confident, but the internal self-talk was different. And so it's just strengthening that muscle, because the longer you go, the easier it gets. But knowing the stigma, like, where am I at with the stigma? And making peace with that. And I've had to work through that. So the more I talk about it, the more I shed it.
Yeah.
And the more people are comfortable around me bringing that stuff up, like, Toni, tell me why you don't drink. And depending on the person, because I get to frame it any way I want. Depending on the person, my answers are, I cashed in all my drink tickets if I want to be funny.
Phrase.
Yeah. Or if it's someone where I know we're going to have a little bit deeper conversation, I'll say, I didn't like my relationship with alcohol and I knew something needed to change. And so, and everything in between. I'm like, I'll say, do you want me to burn this house down? Because if I drink, that's probably what's going to happen. Like, because I have a sense of humor about it. Like, and again, it comes with time, but actually saying it. So if you're at home and you're about ready to go to your first event and be alcohol free or sober, say it out loud. I know it might feel weird, but go in the mirror and say it, because we sound way cooler in our heads than when it comes out.
I love
So
that.
that'd be a little advice.
That is a great tip. Okay, I want to go back to the hockey team and the men's sports world.
Mhm.
My assumption is that there are many people within the organization, players or the, office people, coaches, whatever,
Mhm.
for whom alcohol is being a problem.
Yes.
And so in your role, how do you get to navigate that?
Well, I'm really fortunate because I'm so open about it. Other people within the organization have been open with me, right? And so, one, I come at this, again, curiosity and non-judgment, right? So I get it. And so there are people that I work with that probably don't have the greatest relationship with alcohol, but I was there at one point. And so it's just kind of watching it. And if I get uncomfortable, I mean, there have been events, not just like in the sports industry, because we're at all kinds of games and all stars and whatever. I'll just leave. Like, there's one of these things we tell ourselves is, I have to be there. Well, I'm like, no, you don't. You don't have to be there. Like, if you show up and you're there and you're like, there was one time not too long ago where someone was falling down drunk. They were okay. They had someone with them that could take care of them. So I wanted to say I didn't peace out and be like, good luck. But I left because I'm like, this just isn't where I want to be. I'm uncomfortable because it reminds me of how I used to be.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be in that space. So I really, I'm non-judgmental. I'm curious, and I'm very transparent. So there are actually two people in the organization at very high levels that choose not to drink as well. And so I have like this community, and community, if I were to add a fourth C to what I said earlier, as you know, is so important. So who do you surround yourself with? So, right, like when I was a drinker, who did I surround myself with?
Thinkers.
Right. And now that I'm a non-drinker, who do I surround myself with?
Yep.
Both. I'll say both, but more so I spend my time with non-drinkers. And I'm not out till 2 in the morning or whatever. I'm not doing that. And here's the other thing I learned. I was definitely the straw that stirred the drink, if you know what I mean, because I, when I remove myself as a drinker from the equation, what's interesting is people didn't drink nearly as much.
Right? I was absolutely that person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I wanted to justify my own drinking by getting all of these moderate drinkers into the same lane as I was. So, yeah.
Yeah. Get in the boat with me.
The next day they would say, man, I have never drank so much in my entire life. I'm thinking to myself, that was Tuesday.
Yeah. Like what? That was a warm up.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I just learning. So I don't know if there's anything concrete in that other than really, and where I see a lot of people struggle, it's the shame. And as Brene Brown said, I believe it's Brene Brown, like the opposite of shame is vulnerability, right? And so as uncomfortable as it was for me to be vulnerable, and I started with social media, I just decided at day 80, if I put it out there, I could close a loophole. Because if there's a loophole, Toni Will crawl through it. So I was like, if I'm more open about it, because I wasn't open about it when I was in my AA journey because I felt so much shame. But if I'm willing to talk about it and close that loophole and put it on social media, now when I go out, not that everyone's on social media or reading my stuff, but there's less conversations I have to have about this, right? Or I get people who want to talk to me about it. And
Yes.
it helped build my confidence.
Yes.
So that helps at work too, because they see it. And so I was just open with everyone. I'm like, yep, I don't drink anymore. And here's why. And I just put it out there.
That's amazing. And that really is, again, what our mission is just to normalize it so that you're not a good, bad, or otherwise person as a result of your choices around alcohol. You're you on your own 2 feet, and I get to interact and judge you based on that, not on your drinking status.
Well, no, and the other thing I point out is I don't eat meat. I choose not to eat meat. Um, it does not make me a meataholic. Right? No one's coming up to me and saying, Toni, did you stop eating meat because you couldn't control your meat eating? No. I choose not to eat it for health and wellness reasons, and I love animals. And so, why do we have to justify this? Is hilarious. It's so normal, right? I choose not to eat meat for health and wellness reasons, and I love animals. Okay, I wasn't a meataholic. And so when I put it in those terms, right, it's like, oh, this makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And conversely, when somebody does have a physiological reaction to something, like somebody who has to go gluten-free, I don't look at them and say, ooh, but I personally have a physiological problem that happens in me when I ingest alcohol.
Oh,
And yet, when I say I choose not to drink alcohol, sometimes I get the, really? Why not?
yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy making.
It's crazy. It is crazy. And I just remember because I was that jerk who would be like, oh, I don't trust people who don't drink, whatever. I don't want to hang out with non-drinkers. That was 100% because I wasn't comfortable with my relationship with alcohol and is nothing to do with that person. That was all me and my problem. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Toni, I am just thrilled with this conversation we've been having. We could talk for hours.
Hours.
As a result of all of this stuff, I took away a couple of key points. One of the things that I took away was that when we live authentically out loud, people are drawn to us,
Mhm.
sometimes because they want to know how we got there,
Yep.
sometimes because birds of a feather like flocking together.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I took from this was the boldness that you have to really think about breaking barriers.
Mhm.
You're doing it as a woman in the male-dominated sports industry. And I think also bringing this alcohol-free life into that world, which is amazing. And that's what we want to invite people to do. We want to invite you, break barriers, be bold, be the example that you want to set for somebody's children, if not yours,
Yeah. That's
and
exactly it.
allow the relationships to come to you that were meant to come to you, and be willing to engage in those conversations. Like, that's just so powerful. So
Yes,
before
absolutely.
I wanted to ask, was there anything else that you wanted to add to this?
No, it's funny you bring, there's two things. One is small, but I'll save this one for the end because I know it was mainly dentists, but I want to talk about the dentist real quick. But what you were talking about with being bold and I'm going to put some extra words in there, unapologetic, rebellious, disruptive. That's what my professional development coaching, and you'll have to go check out the website, ToniWillCoaching.com. That's what the whole thing is about. It's about career disruption. And so someone that's looking to get promoted or change jobs or start their own business or just get out of a midlife rut with their career, that's what the coaching is. And it's very different than Mindfulness Elevated, which is like a soft place to land, health, wellness, lifestyle. So I want to point that out. But the other thing I want to point out is that I have been diligent about going to the dentist since I was a kid every 6 months, and I've never missed an appointment. So I just want all you dentists out there to know that. And I floss every day.
Toni gets a gold star for the day.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So that's it.
That's amazing. Well, Toni, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for everybody listening. Remember, no one ever regrets not drinking the morning after. And every decision you make today shapes the smiles of your tomorrows. Keep making choices that brighten your world and the world around you. Until next time.